So welcome to this session on cultivating equality through using narrative-based transdisciplinary research. From the context presentations you've seen so far, the methodological challenge that we are sitting with in this project is one of building resilient communities within unequal gender power relations in Bihar. And basically, this means that we're sitting here or facing a twofold challenge. The one is to build resilience communities on the one hand, and on the other hand, to do so with historically marginalized women. And of course, the methodology question is the fundamental question, the how question. How are we planning to do this? And basically, our approach is to use a narrative-based research approach method for better understanding the marginalized women's existing coping strategies, and using this for then developing new insights and understandings of the whole notion of resilience. So we will be using a grounded theory building approach and then hopefully integrating that with expert resilience knowledge. In other words, we will be following both a bottom-up and a top-down approach. And hopefully in the process of doing so, we will be coming up with some new innovative ideas. The narrative-based approach that I've referred to is also known as SenseMaker, and it has got 4 important aspects to it, which I'm going to quickly share with you. Starting with the logic, the reasoning that we'll be following in this approach is what is called abductive research, abductive reasoning. For doing explorative research versus an inductive or deductive logic reasoning. And basically, this logic is inspired by the fact that from an epistemological humility position, in which we are admitting that we don't quite fully understand the marginalized women's existing coping strategies. This is, for us, an ill-researched area because past research has tended to predominantly focus on expert opinions and solutions, which would be if one would adopt an epistemological certainty position where things are already known. But we're saying there's a need for better understanding marginalized women's their own lived experiences when dealing with water and other climatic challenges. And we want to better understand that. And then as I said, we would like to build that understanding and insights into the building of resilient communities in Bihar. As far as the guiding principles of this narrative-based approach is concerned, there are at least these 4 very important guiding principles. The first one is the principle of co-design, in which we will gather enumerators from the Bihar communities that we'll be working with, and they will participate actively in co-constructing key elements of the questionnaire or the certification framework that we're going to use before we go into the field to collect stories with this tool. A little bit more about that in a minute. Self-signification is about handing the interpretive power of sense-making to the marginalized women in Bihar for them to make sense of their own lived experiences by using the co-designed signification framework. Epistemic justice is again an acknowledgement that knowledge co-production mostly occurs in unequal knowledge power relations. In other words, situations of epistemic injustice. And in the context of Bihar, this means in terms of unequal knowledge power relation, gender relations. And then epistemic justice means that it's the practice of trying to do something about this, trying to redress these imbalances throughout the transformative transdisciplinary research process. And then distributed cognition is a principle that deals with our cognitive biases, which we are again admitting or acknowledging that it affects both the researchers and ordinary people. And one way to overcome these blind spots of ours is to actually work with the collective wisdom of what is known the collective wisdom of crowds, where the aggregate of stories coalesce into more insightful understandings of the problem situations at hand. In Bihar, this means then working intentionally with the distributed cognition of diverse marginalized women, and thereby allowing their shared wisdom to emerge through their many unique lived experiences. Another way to look at these four guiding principles is to basically say that it deals with human agency, which is twofold. The one is there's interpretive human agency, in which we acknowledge that people change or can change their situations by interpreting it, the way they interpret it and understand it and make sense of their situations. And on the other hand, we are admitting that this is a relational, distributed type of human agency, because people, although it happens between people, people are normally not always in close contact with each other. They can be very well dispersed geographically, culturally, administratively across many different regions and living and working areas. And therefore, it's critically important that we work with an approach that can work with many pairs of eyes and ears, both within and across scattered marginalized communities in Bihar. And this is then also known as distributed ethnography. The tool elements of this narrative approach consist actually of 5 elements: prompting questions, dyads, triads, tones, and multiple choice questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into any depth here. We rather want to focus now on some of the process aspects of this approach. It's an iterative process. It looks something like this, but we can also convert it into a more linear version with phases and steps. Again, we don't have time to go into any depth here. And I will just be sharing with you a few ice cream licks of what this process actually contains or entails. And the best way to do that is to just share with you some photographs of some of our other African experiences where we've used this approach. This first collage of photographs is all about how we've co-designed the signification framework that I've already shared with you with marginalized groups in different parts of South Africa, for example, different communities. And just to mention that these people have had in terms of our education system, they've had very low primary school education. So this approach doesn't mean that you have to be highly educated, formally educated. In terms of the narrative collection step or phase of the process, there are many different ways of collecting stories. We can use pen and paper or smartphones and tablets and computers and so on. But very importantly, just to share with you here that we've used very successfully in the past young people to go and interview adults. And this has been a particularly successful approach. Also because these young people, they know where to go and find the stories in their communities. They know where people are normally gathering together on a daily basis, where they feed their children, where they play card games, where they just socialize. And these young people have managed to get into these places and gather very rich stories, in this case in Ghana, for example. In terms of implementation, we've also had an ample experience of where we've co-implemented some what we call small-scale, safe-to-fail socio-technical innovations, like this particular example of a redesigned shack in an informal settlement in South Africa. So there again, it's important and possible to work with the communities that you started sharing their stories with when it comes to the point in the process of actually implementing some solutions together with them. So then when we turn our attention back to the context and situation of Bihar, as I've said, that our challenge is going to be to work with the marginalized women's lived experiences and to better understand, to try and better understand their existing innovative coping strategies and actions. And I think it will be quite a reasonable assumption to make that we will when we start doing that, when we start listening to their stories, we will find many stories that are the same. We will also find some stories that are different and differing. And then we will also find some stories that are similar, but not exactly the same. And this is going to be our sense-making challenge. How are we going to make sense of these different stories that we will be engaging with? And here our approach is going to be one of more is better. And by more is better, we mean both quantitatively and qualitatively speaking. In other words, the more diverse narratives, the better. And in following this approach, we are confident that we will be coming up with rich contextual insights of the ongoing changing situations, contextual situations in Bihar. And at the same time also helps us to understand the different levels of granularity, the detail of the stories that we will be engaging with. So I thank you for your attention. There are my contact details if you would like to discuss anything in more depth with me, but I'm also looking forward to our Q&A session a bit later on, and then maybe we can discuss some more of the issues that I've only just raised during this short presentation. Thank you.